when they consider security, they consider the security of AWS or GitHub. And then if you have some integrations, they are not going to care about it because, well, it's trusted. But you can actually, that's the main way to compromise an organization. You get some credentials somewhere. From these credentials, you find more credentials. Let's call them GitHub secrets. Then you go to the other cloud. You find that, I don't know, you get credentials for GCP, and you find that you can actually write in a bucket that is containing, I don't know, Docker images in AWS, that then these images are being run in EKS.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the 401 Access Denied podcast, brought to you by both Cybrary and Delinea. I'm the host for the episode today. I'm Joseph Carson, Chief Security Scientist and Advisory CISO at Delinea, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. And I'm really excited. We have a returning guest for today's episode and a very, very fun and exciting topic. I'm so excited to have Carlos Polop back onto the episode. Our previous episode was basically it skyrocketed. It was amazing, and the amount of listeners. So they really enjoyed it, and hopefully we're back to bring them more fantastic content. So Carlos, welcome back to the show. Just give some of the audience a bit of introduction of who you are, what you do, some of the fun things you enjoy to do, and some of your passions. Kick it off. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me here again. It's very exciting. I really love that people like our previous conversation, and I think this is going to be even better because we are going to be talking about more state of the art things.
Mm-hmm.
So about myself, I'm currently a practice manager, team lead in cloud and infrastructure pen testing in Halvor, elite Web3 company. I'm the guy that has been writing Hack Tricks and Hack Tricks Cloud and the piece. I love CTFs. In general, I dedicate most of my free time to cybersecurity. It's something I really enjoy: how to break things, how to hack into things, and learn how to all kind of things work. Because at the end, cloud is not more about breaking, but about understanding how everything work and is connected, and how to abuse the features.
Absolutely. And just as you mentioned, I pretty much do the same. I'm literally in between. I'm actually doing a CTF over my other machine at the other side of the room here. So I'm actually taking a break from CTFs at the moment. But absolutely, it's one of the things I love learning. And when I think about hacking itself, it's almost like it's like a reverse escape room. Where in the escape room you're trying to get out of the room, and for us it's like we're trying to break into the room. It's almost like it's a reverse puzzle. So you're always trying to think about, and you've got this room and you're thinking about what's all the ways we can get into it. So absolutely, for me, it's always exciting. And the previous topic that we covered really in depth was all about different types of privilege escalation, whether it being on Windows platforms, on Mac OS, into Linux and Unix platforms. And we went into a lot of talking about some of the different tools that we use in order to do enumeration. And we covered a lot of the P suite as well, which is fantastic, which is great for, that quick automation. It's about, really getting that visibility. So today's topic is really getting into thinking about, okay, let's extend further. Cloud has been a big digital transformation for many organizations. We're talking about digital transformation, but they've been using it for years. Even just if you do a Google search, you have to think about that's a cloud service. But they're starting to host more of their applications and more of their infrastructure and consume more cloud services, and it's getting very, very complex. And what I've seen is that the challenge is as organizations do that digital transformation, they're trying to retrofit the security they've done on premise and try to push it to the cloud. And unfortunately, that isn't really, the security that it provides is not really native, and they make a lot of mistakes and end up having a lot of things open. So what we really need kind of look at is what's some of the techniques and steps, a lot of the cloud providers, what do you see as some of the common ways that attackers look to gain that initial access? So let's start with the initial access into cloud platforms. Where are some of the go-to places that attackers will look for, or even pen testers would be looking for, just to get that foothold? What's some of the starting points that you see?
Actually, it's pretty funny you are asking me this because I have spent last week, I was preparing a talk actually about entry points in cloud because there are so many and people always talk about the main ones. obviously the main entry point that everybody is going to know about it is an open bucket where you can find sensitive credentials, where you can maybe write and change some JavaScript file,
Mhm.
where you can just steal credentials. That's the main one, but there are tens, there are hundreds of them. The one that I have found that is the most worthy, the most profitable one,
Mhm.
is going to be searching for leaks in GitHub, in GitLabs, in
Mhm.
any kind of code repositories, because it's very very easy. You can just run git leaks, truffle huff. Actually, I just released a tool where you can just put the organization name and it will run both tools over all the repos of the organization and public workers of the organization.
Okay.
It's going to be finding, and this is very fun because the main misconfiguration I find in the clients that I check their cloud is that they are assigning too many permissions to
Mhm.
users, to keys. So every time you find a key, you are highly probably going to be able to do fun stuff. But again, I don't want to focus in these two main things that is what everybody knows about, because there are plenty of ways to enter in a cloud environment. For example, there was a very fun investigation research. I think it was in 2020
Mhm.
about AWS Cognito.
Mhm.
Cognito is just an identity provider that is going to allow you to give AWS credentials in your account to users that just log in potentially in just a web application. So it's pretty weird because you are saying, okay, you can log in and you are going to have IAM credentials in
Mhm.
AWS. Is made for easy applications, I think, that maybe you want to give each user access to a bucket so they can store their information in there or retrieve it, or
Mhm.
to some web database where they can save its data. But actually, in this research, you can see that most of people were giving a lot of access to EC2 instance, to S3 buckets, and in some cases you didn't even have to have a user, because you can give an IAM role to unauthenticated users. So you just go to the web application, you check that it is using Cognito, you can see that in the source code, and you say, okay, I'm an authenticated user, give me my IAM role. It is going to give you some temporary credentials, and you are there. It's stupid, but there is you can even go further with this, because by default, if you are using a user pool in
Mhm.
Cognito, by default you are going to allow people to register themselves, and there is another IAM role to authenticated users. So you can get the unauthenticated IAM role, create a user, confirm it, and get the authenticated IAM role. And now you have two roles in an account, and you
It's
mostly didn't do anything.
it sounds like security's turned off for most cloud
Yeah, yeah,
providers.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
the scary. I always hear the word. One thing I always hear is about security by design. I'm thinking, but I think what we're really saying is that yeah, they might have security by design, but it's not turned on. They're not using it, and it's almost like you using default policies and not really thinking about the configuration you do. So it sounds like a lot of that initial access, first foothold, is from a lot of misconfigurations or
Hmm.
from I think one of the things that you mentioned, it was sort of GitHub, people's personal GitHub repositories that they might even be doing work for organizations, and leaving some of the organization's credentials stored within their even personal GitHub repositories that
Yeah,
might be public facing. Um, Poor version control, where they basically maybe use credentials in earlier kind of versions that they've checked in, or compiled, but ultimately not removing those, and cleaning them up. And ultimately, so if you can go and look for previous versions in the repository, you might be able to find some credentials that might be lurking in some of the older versions. So it sounds like the initial access is an easy is an easy step, which gets really concerning. So what are some of I mean, when attackers are targeting, what's some of the roles that you want to get when we're looking at cloud infrastructure? Is it developers primarily the top target, or is it infrastructure administrators, or is it just business user? What would be the roles of people that tend to be the ones that might be targeted for that initial access?
well, obviously the role I always
Mhm.
love to have is administrator. If you can have
Absolutely.
administrator, if you can be organized administrator, obviously depend on the clouds, the name, but there are always administrators. If you can get there, you're going to be awesome. Actually, in red teamings, if you cannot find any kind of this stupid initial access, or even if you find some buckets and but you cannot exploit it further, one thing people usually do is going to be learn about the company in LinkedIn, find out, as you said, who are the developers, who are the system administrators, who is working in IT, and try to send some spare phishing to those, because
Mhm.
these are the guys that most probably have access to this administrator role. Um, but actually, you don't always need these kind of roles.
Mhm.
I don't know the name in Google Cloud. I think it's called editor, and in Azure it has another name. I don't remember now, but it's called like traditional roles. So all
Mhm.
these main cloud environments have these, all of them. No, I think AWS doesn't have them anymore.
Mhm.
So they have these three initial roles, which can be resumed as administrator, write, and read.
Mhm.
So in order to make easier at the beginning for people to use cloud, they just have this role. They didn't have granular permissions like now.
Mhm.
So these kind of roles have still exist, and they are given by default to certain service account, to certain bot accounts. They
Mhm.
call it this way. And if you get this right, let's call it right role,
Yeah.
you are going to be able to actually escalate to administrator. So it's kind of stupid because you are still supporting some kind of roles that are supposed, like,
Mhm.
okay, with this you can use it, but you cannot manage permissions, but you can actually give you the permission to manage permissions.
Mhm.
So that's a very easy privilege escalation. So even if at some point you cannot get admin directly, you are going to have these traditional roles that you can abuse.
Okay.
And in the case you don't have these traditional roles, there are, because clouds have thousands of permissions, you
Mhm.
might be able to get some other permissions that combine them together. You can do things like, okay, I'm going to launch an EC2 instance, and I'm going
Mhm.
to attach this IAM role, then I'm going to get the metadata, and then I'm going to previous. Well, there are tens, thousands, well, thousands probably not, but there are tens of services that are going to allow you to exploit your permission to previous. So if I have to choose, I will say admin. But actually, if I want to be stealthy, I
Mhm.
won't grant admin to myself. I will find a sign of a sketchy, difficult to find path to get to
Mhm.
admin that I know I can exploit, but probably the IT guy don't know that you can exploit it to
Yeah,
previous.
absolutely. It's always again, it's the combination between staying stealthy and not creating
Mhm.
any noise, because that's ultimately that's ultimately what attackers want to do.
Yeah.
They want to get the access. So I was walking the walls and finding those low hanging fruit that they don't that are not using that often, that are not being frequently monitored at all, and finding those ones that they might think is low impact or low risk, but ultimately giving you a lot of permissions and privileges. And you mentioned, is also APIs something that I've seen a lot of cloud APIs that are publicly facing in order to use for, um, let's say, communicating with other cloud infrastructures or on premise. Do you see APIs being abused that often also in cloud infrastructure, or is that something that
But
is
what
probably,
do you mean?
if you
I
have
mean, I'm not.
services and like an API that you're going to call, let's say, for integration or sharing data, that may not be configured correctly, or that may expose too much information.
Um, I mean, it always is going to depend on how the API is configured,
Mm,
who can talk to it. In this case, I think we are talking about defending an API REST.
mm,
That is going to depend, obviously, which kind of permissions this API REST have inside the cloud. But what I have seen between connections is that a different cloud and on-premise service
mm,
is going to be trusting the cloud, and the cloud is going to be trusting this on-premise service. And this is actually that is happening a lot. Kind
mhm.
of, it's happening a lot in Azure. That Azure ID is going to be trusted on-premise ID, and on-premise
Yes.
ID is going to be trusted Azure ID. And there are ways you can abuse this kind of trust to
Hmm.
just compromise the other one. So it's fun. I'm not very much into the Azure world. I have been
Hmm.
investigating, researching more AWS and GCP, But I definitely know this, that it's fine that we have been experiencing like 10 years where each year some 0 day is happening
Hmm.
in Active Directory that is going to
Yeah,
compromise the whole Active Directory. And instead
absolutely.
of Microsoft saying, hey, we are going to stop this, now we have Azure ID, now we have this that is completely separated to Active Directory, it doesn't have the same vulnerabilities. They say, okay, we are going to do that, and we are going to firmly trust that an administrator in Active Directory should be administrator in Azure Active Directory. So
It's
you
all
are
about
just
the
coming.
pulling and synchronizing, and ultimately, if you can get access to one, you can wait a while for that sync to occur and get access to everything. It's just waiting
Exactly,
for it.
exactly. So
So once you get in, so let's say okay, we've got some roles, and maybe we've compromised somebody's AWS configuration file or Git repository. Um, what are some of the ways that you would then let's say you've got that initial foothold? What are some of the things you would do for enumeration? What would you be looking for the next step in order
mhm.
to? Would you be looking to try to add permissions to yourself, or would you be still looking for keys or services that allow you to create, as you mentioned, you might be creating pods and nodes in Kubernetes, or you might be able to create virtual machines or create different accounts. What would be the kind of steps you would be looking for from an enumeration perspective once you've got that initial foothold?
I think that the enumeration is going to be heavily depends if I am
Mm-hmm.
doing a white box or a red team,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously you can be more noisy
Yeah.
in a white box than if you are doing this red team. I think that in red teams you need to be careful on each action you are doing. You cannot use automated tools. You definitely cannot use
Yeah.
that. And for example, if you steal some metadata token from an SSRF,
Mm-hmm.
you need to know that, for example, in AWS, War Duty is highly probably going to be able to catch you. So you should be dumping also the network
Mm-hmm.
rangers that it is being using. You need to launch your own VPC in order to mimic the same situation. So War Duty is not going to be saying, hey, someone is using internal metadata credentials in some external place. So you always need to know which kind of alerts you can be triggering
Mm-hmm.
in order to be stealthy. But also, I have already said all the clouds have tens or thousands of services. It's
Mm-hmm.
very complicated to list all of them. I think that the first thing I will try to do would be to check the main services,
Mm-hmm.
S3, EC2, maybe because I know this is not going to trigger any alert. Like
Mm-hmm.
everybody is checking this. It's
It'll be
not.
too much. It would be too much noise, I think, to be able
Yeah,
to see
but
anything.
you
That's
cannot
the
say,
problem.
"Hey, you, you,
Yeah.
you got your credentials compromised because you check S3. That's not going to happen. And if I have the option, I will also try to check IAM. If I
Mm-hmm.
can list roles, if I can list users, and if I can list federation integrations, that is going to be awesome because I know
Mm-hmm.
who I need to attack. How can I previous if I can? Um, but actually, this is fun. This is right in AWS. But then you go to GCP, and this a total different movie because for some reason they decide that there is not going to be an IAM service. There is not going to be some policies that you have a role and you can note where you have access, what can you do, and whatever. You need to have the least IAM permissions in each resource to know who can access that resource.
Okay.
And man, there you are pretty fucked because or you check everything and you try to check all your permissions over all your services, or you're not really going to know what you can do. So in AWS, you can say, okay, I want these three roles that allows me to
Mm-hmm.
list privilege, list permissions, and list users, and I know what is happening. And in GCP, you will be asking, okay, I need editor role in the whole organization to be able to list everything. Because if not, you just don't know what you can do.
Sounds
So
sounds sounds like in GCP you're going to have less visibility as well. Just from if you want to audit yourself, if you want to. So to your point, if you want to do assessment of yourself,
mhm.
you're probably going to find very difficult to be able to get that granular understanding if you're only going to be able to see your permissions of your own role and not be able to expand further. So it does sound like there's the benefits and the negatives there of not having at least a transparency of your own environment.
I completely agree. Actually, in my previous role,
Mhm.
I was asked to do exactly that task. They told me like, okay, we have GCP. We need to do some security audit. We need to limit privilege, know what is happening, who can do what.
Mhm.
So I started learning about GCP because I didn't know anything. I started learning about enumeration, and I found this like I cannot just dump I am policies and
Mhm.
roles and users like in AWS and just check who can do that. I need to go to each service and say, hey, can anyone do anything here? And they would tell me, yes, this guy can do this. And that's why I developed a tool called Purple Panda,
Mhm.
which is actually going to be doing this in GCP. I configure things like 20 services or something like that, and it's going to be going through all of them, asking for permissions, and then it's going to do something similar to Bloodhound.
Yep.
It has
Yeah.
an intelligence, and it has like the set of permissions, and if you have this permission, you can impersonate this. So you are going to find a graph telling you who can attack, who can impersonate other users,
Mhm.
other service accounts, other privileges in order to escalate. So this actually helps me a lot when I need to do a white box. It's incredibly less painful. But if I need to do a red team against GCP, I will need to take more time to enumerate everything by hand and read as many
Yeah.
documentation as you can find about how the client has architecture
Yeah.
the cloud.
Sounds like it's much easier for attackers to stay stealthy and hidden in GCP, just because of that complexity. So with Purple Panda, how similar is the things like Paco and other types of enumeration tools?
Yeah.
Um, is it similar to being able to what other platforms does it support as well that you can also enumerate where are you going? What's the next stages with Purple Panda as well? Because I love, for me, Bloodhound is fantastic. Being able to just basically run it against an AD, get a bunch of collectors going from some standard nodes, and be able to do basically graph theory and visualizing, start really understanding about what can I write to, who am I a member of, who do I need to get to in order to get the domain administrator. So really looking at all those different areas, what do you think that how similar is it? Is it like the let's
Yeah,
say
the
the
other
Bloodhound
tools.
for cloud? Is that is that what it's?
That's what I would love it to be.
Hmm.
So you mentioned, for example, Pacu. There are other enumerators. We have
Hmm.
Scout Seed, Cloud Exploit,
Yep.
Steam Pipe. Well, several of them. It's different. It's different, for example, from Pacu because Pacu is mainly done to enumerate a little bit and attack. Purple Panda is not made for
Mm.
attack. It doesn't have any exploit, any payloads. It's just for enumeration.
Enumeration.
Yeah, and it's different from other enumerators because I think other enumerators are focused on things like the thieves benchmark, AWS best security practices. Like they are
Hmm.
going to be doing these checks, and I want Purple Panda to be focused on red teams. Like let's
Hmm.
find things that you can actually exploit,
Yeah.
not like, oh, you don't have this encrypted. Well, the red teamer probably doesn't have any kind of access, so it's indifferent if it's not encrypted.
Hmm.
So my idea is to find the things you can attack. And I like you said the bloodhound of cloud because I don't want Purple Panda to be a tool that you have AWS, you launch it. You
Hmm.
have GCP, you launch it. I want Purple Panda to be able to launch it in the same session and then finding ways
Find the
to go
paths
from
between the
one way
clouds.
to another. Yeah.
Which
And
which is
that's
what yeah, which is what we were talking about earlier, was that
why.
in traditional environments, lateral move was going between applications and servers. It sounds to me, when I look at cloud and you look at hybrid cloud and multi-cloud, I mean, no organization is very much stuck in one cloud environment. You have to have multiple. In SaaS environments, you have either AWS and Azure and GCP. You have little bits and pieces all over the place. And to your point, is that absolutely is that it sounds like lateral moves in cloud is actually going between clouds. And if that's if the path that Purple Panda is going to be able to show the lateral moves, not just between domains like a Bloodhound would show you between the forest and domains, but also between cloud providers, that would be impressive and hugely valuable because organizations that's a big area of risk right now that they don't have that visibility into.
Nobody has this visibility. Actually, people doesn't even consider it like
Mm,
a risk. They when they consider security, they consider the security of AWS or GitHub. And
yep.
then if you have some integrations, they are not going to care about it because, well, it's trusted.
Hmm.
But you can actually that's the main way to compromise an organization. You get some credentials somewhere. From these credentials you find more credentials. Let's call them GitHub
Mm,
secrets.
yep.
Then you go to the other cloud, you find that, I don't know, you get credentials for GCP, and you find that you can actually write in a bucket that is containing, I don't know, Docker images in AWS, that
Hmm.
then these images are being run in EKS, and these EKS have some AWS role. So you start at GitHub, you are now administrator in AWS, you probably can access, you can just pivot through clouds, and that's pretty funny. That's what I wanted Purple
Hmm.
Panda to be.
Hmm.
The thing is that the bigger Purple Panda is getting, the more complex it is being getting. So I want to continue with the project, but
Hmm.
it's been a real challenge because every
Yeah.
time I want to access to add something else, I need to think about what was before, how can it be
Hmm.
connected with everything, and well, it's complicated at the moment. At the moment, it's true that it's already supporting GitHub, Kubernetes,
Hmm.
GCP, Concourse, and something else, I think. So you are going to be able to find, actually, you're going to be able to find a path that I love a lot. That
Hmm.
is, so you can bypass branch protections in GitHub.
Okay.
You from GitHub, this is going to be run in a cloud function
Hmm.
in GCP that is going to have some credentials from GCP, some service accounts. Let's say that this service account have access over a GKS, a Kubernetes cluster inside GCP. So you can access the Kubernetes cluster, and for the Kubernetes cluster, there are easy ways to give it other GCP permissions. So
Hmm.
you can escalate in GCP through GKS.
It's
And
quite
actually,
it's
Purple
quite
Panda
scary.
will be able to draw all this way.
That's quite scary when you think about it. It's being able to basically find all of those relations and all of those
Mhm.
permissions, and literally, jump between cloud providers, and show you basically all of a sudden, as you mentioned, you start in the GitHub repository, and all of a sudden you find yourself basically going through different cloud providers, and ultimately maybe in the organization's critical infrastructure. And even today, where you could think of organizations which are doing even IoT or even cloud service providers that might be managing many different organizations, that all of a sudden you could find yourself with a lot of power and control. So I think it's organizations. I don't think organizations are really thinking about the security from within. It's going back to that same old kind of traditional security where you're always thinking about protecting the firewalls and the entry points. And I think organizations have really moved to thinking about from cloud, it's all about the identities and access, but not really thinking about once you're inside the cloud, what can you then do? Once you're inside that infrastructure environment, where can you move to? I don't think organizations have really went to that, consideration from a security perspective.
Yeah, people, I think, just support. Well, first of all, I think there is a lack of cloud professionals.
Hmm.
A lot of people I have met, everyone that I know is going to tell me that they know about cloud because they know how to create an account in AWS or run an EC2 instance. So they know cloud. But that's most of current cloud professionals. They don't care about how can I isolate, how can I improve the permissions, like in AM. They are going to just be putting wildcards everywhere. This lambda need access
Yeah.
to this secret. Okay, it can read now every secret, like, or this is actually something I found. Like, they have a role called lambda read secrets,
Yep.
and because
Yeah.
it's called lambda read secrets, every lambda is going to have that iron role, even if it doesn't need to read secrets, because they created that role for lambda, so it should be in all lambdas. um, People is not focused on security and cloud at the moment. They just expect it to be secure. They just expect it
Yeah.
that because it's kind of confusing and difficult, and it's complicated to follow all the links,
Hmm.
nobody's going to attack that. And I guess what they need is just to, well, improve, to be more mature about cloud, to learn more from experience. and to be lucky that nobody's going to abuse that before they learn their mistakes.
Absolutely. It sounds a lot from my, when you're talking about even the skills and resources, you're absolutely right. The cloud skill sets is so thin and very lacking. And even if you do have skills, I mean, from my knowledge as well, I mean, I've got okay knowledge in Azure in specific areas, not from the networking perspective, but definitely within identities and access, the traditional AD kind of that you're familiar with, the resources. When I move across into AWS, you can get by with some of the terminologies are very similar, but it's a very different setup. And I so for me to move from Azure to AWS, I get confused, and I have to go back and have to start reading a lot again and start learning and trying to understand about what's the terminologies and how is it structured and what roles. Because even if I'm giving a specific role or a service, it may be very different from what I'd be used to in Azure. So it's very rare that you might get somebody who might have all of that knowledge. So it sounds like even if you're a multi-cloud, if you utilize in multiple clouds, you're going to have a large amount of knowledge and resources to need to communicate very well together, that need to be collaborating and working. And I think from a security perspective is I think organizations are going to become very dependent on cloud red teaming and purple teaming. I think that's where I think you're going to organizations are going to realize that they will not be able to do this alone, and they will have to go to definitely skilled resources who do this as a specific role. So I think cloud pen testing into purple teaming and red teaming and all the other colors of teaming that you can get that's being introduced. I don't know if we're going to have a new term for cloud teaming, but I definitely think that organizations they're going to need help. I think they're going to need to go and start looking at whether it's getting into tools like Purple Panda that will do automation, because absolutely when we're talking about pen testing, you prefer to do these things manually because you don't want to be alerted. But as an organization, I would go and run Bloodhound to try and find the risks in my Active Directory. I would go and run the P suites to find my misconfigurations in some of my critical operating systems. So as a defender, I would want to do automation to get that visibility. So I think this is where organizations are going to become very critical into a lot of the automation tools, so they get that visibility. So I think this is definitely what you're doing is going to be something is going to be a used combination of one is getting that visibility and finding out can you attack or get from one cloud to another and exploit your infrastructure. I think this is
Yeah,
going to be crucial.
actually, about that, as I told you, is
Mm,
it's kind of complex to maintain a program like Purple Panda, be working in all major cloud
mm,
providers, all major SaaS applications. But that's also why I have released the new Hacktrix Cloud
mm,
in the subdomain cloud. Because actually, if I cannot automate it, at least I'm going to be writing about it. So if,
mm,
for example, you manage to compromise a GitHub, I have a GitHub section about, okay, you can attack this, and this. You
mhm,
can check GitHub actions. You can attack a self-hosted runner. You can steal secrets. You can bypass branch protections. If you manage to compromise Kubernetes, if you manage to compromise,
mhm,
obviously, AWS, GCP, Azure, I try to condense all the information I found from the community and all my researches in
mhm,
this book. So even if you still don't have Purple Panda for your current application, you still can see how it can be attacked.
mhm.
You can learn about it. You can improve your security posture. Actually, Hacktrix is not just about hacking and attacks.
It's
It has a lot of basic information, so you can learn about what you are doing to later understand the attack. It doesn't make any sense that I'm going to tell you you can pre-skin AWS with
mhm.
these roles if you don't even know what our role is. Um,
Absolutely. I,
so
I
that's
think
one.
are you doing the same thing you did with the other previous P's? That because what I love about things like WinPs and MPs and the whole P suite is that you link it back to the original Hacktrix kind of documentation and exactly what it's doing and how it's doing it and why it's doing it. Is Purple Panda having that same backlink into, for example, the cloud Hacktrix? Will you be able
Yeah.
to see, well, this part of the Purple Panda is doing this, and here's where you can go and read that documentation to learn more about it in the cloud hack tricks, for example. Is that something that you're looking to do,
Yeah,
or is
yeah,
that?
it's actually something that is done.
Mm,
So when you see the graph of Purple Panda, you are
mhm,
going to find these previous relations. If you click on the previous relations, you will be able to see a summary and the reasons. The
Mhm.
reason is, for example, going to be something like, so you have wildcard permissions over these reserves, so then you can impersonate this other user. And it's going
Mhm.
to put also check more information in and a link to hack trees when you have actually the technique you need to exploit and why
Mhm.
this is working in Purple Panda. So you also have the links to dig deeper about what is happening and how to abuse it.
Fantastic. And I've seen the kind of where you're still using the Neo4j kind of, was it importing the CSVs and building it out? Are you looking? What's the next steps? Is it working more on the visualization or working more on actually the supported platforms?
I have a personal problem with that. I need more people. That's the personal problem. So I'm pretty bad at creating GUI applications or creating any kind of related to designs. Actually, all the logos, the piece logos, Purple Panda logos, hack tricks, my girlfriend made them. I don't do them. I'm awfully a designer or drawing. So it would be awesome if someone would be interested in creating I'm thinking about two possibilities: creating a web application for Purple Panda to visualize all the graphs easily,
Mhm.
or to migrate Purple Panda to, instead of storing things in Neo4j, store them in a zip
Mhm.
and use the visualization of Bloodhound in order to check the relations, in
Mhm.
order to have some queries to run. Basically, copy Bloodhound and check Purple Panda in there. Um, but I'm quite limited in time at the moment.
Mhm.
That's why I'm writing more my research instead of programming more. But if people get some interest in this, I would love to have some help in the
So,
visualization, because I understand it's no easy. If you haven't created Purple Panda, it's going to be kind
mhm.
of complicated for you to see all those
Mhm.
graphs and take the most of them.
Absolutely. So for the audience, if you're into basically doing visualization and graphical design, reach out to Carlos. We'll make sure Carlos's contacts will definitely be in the notes, the footnotes of the podcast itself. So we'll definitely make it. I mean, Carlos, you're easily findable even through the Hacktricks website as well. So
Yeah,
your contact details are there. And I think
really
even
happens.
even if the expertise, so you're looking from a modular perspective, if others who want to contribute to Purple Panda, is that something also that you're considering as well to get others to, if maybe it's in another cloud platform that they are specialized in that they could contribute?
Yeah. I'm interested in all kinds of help with Purple Panda. There are some fixes I need to do. Obviously, I want to integrate AWS, Azure,
Hmm.
other SaaS applications such as GitLab, potentially Cloudflare, even
Hmm.
Datadog. I don't know. You can get some kind of interesting information from there. I welcome any kind of help. So if you are very knowledge in Azure, I will appreciate it. If you want to contribute to Purple Panda, and just at the end, it's kind of easy, because you just need to create some kind of library
Hmm.
to contact with the API. Then you create the code to download the main resources, virtual machines, keys,
Hmm.
secrets, lambdas, and anything that is interested in the cloud environment, and then the IAM roles, and then you just define in a YAML the
Hmm.
permissions you need to privesc and where you want to privesc. And Purple
Hmm.
Panda is going to create the graphs, the relations
So
in Neo4j.
So ultimately, what we're doing is similar to Bloodhound creating collectors. It is ultimately the same concept, to go and create those collectors that will actually make the calls, get the data, put it into a zip or CSV, and therefore you can import it as long as it's in the right format.
Yeah,
So, and what's next? I mean, you're also getting a lot of sponsors. I guess sponsoring Hacktricks is also a good way to also contribute to this as well.
it is.
So
It is.
I did see that you did open up, and there's a lot of great sponsors that's been on there. One of the things that I like to kind of, from like, let's say, a defending perspective, what things can organizations do to reduce the risk against privilege escalation in cloud environments? Because it does sound like it is. It's a matter of searching and enumeration. That's what it sounds like. It's a lot of enumerating, looking for where those tokens are, looking for where the secrets are, looking what rules, what permissions you have, what you can do. What can organizations do to have better visibility in addition to running things like Purple Panda in their own environment and finding those? But what security controls can make it more difficult for attackers to be successful?
Well, there is a security control very successful
Mm.
that is hiring me through Halborn.
Okay, earning you, as which is, I think, when we get into it, I mean, that's probably definitely a great direction, is getting the knowledge. I'm not sure that would be scalable in a long term.
Yeah,
You
that's
might.
true.
So, um,
Um, no, yeah, well, about that, I think that the main way is to know your environment very good, to try to isolate as much as possible different environments.
mhm,
If an EC2 instance doesn't need to be talking with a database, just don't put them in the same VPC, don't put them in the
mhm,
same subnetwork, don't allow any kind of interaction. Be always very careful with IAM permissions. There are a lot of tools, paid tools, free tools, and I
mhm,
think even AWS have something that is going to tell you, hey, this role or people using this policy didn't never use this permission. Remove it. This is very interesting because you can easily know just if you have a
mhm,
history with your cloud, you know which permission you can just remove that is not going to affect because
mhm,
nobody ever use it. So this is very useful. And obviously the main things are understand your entry points, understand
mhm,
who are you giving access to, which kind of access you are giving, remove everything that is not needed, and always check for leaks. Like,
mhm,
I don't know why. It's stupid. It's super easy, but companies just don't do it. Just check for leaks in public repositories. What I
mhm,
recommend, for example, if you are using GitHub, is just to have some GitHub actions that
mhm,
before allowing to merge, it is going to be running GitHub list or Truffle Hub, something that is
mhm.
going to be using some stupid regexes to find if you are leaking something. And if you are, it will prevent you. And it will tell you, hey, please remove the commit, do a new one, and remove this sensitive information. It's super simple and it's super dangerous if you don't do it.
Yeah. I think, in addition to what you've been saying today, is I've also got two things in my mind. Is one is how to determine where you've got default configurations. Is, flagging anything that's default settings would be something that would be suspicious to look for, because typically the defaults are going to be something that has open and everyone access. So I think looking where you've got default configurations or policies applied. And I think not only looking for the entry points, maybe you've got public facing web applications or APIs, or that's linked into GitHub repositories, or whatever it might be. But I think it's also then thinking about is those lateral moves as well. Is that not just about what's public facing, but also what's actually where you've got trust between clouds and applications. I think that would also be another area to make sure that you're hardening and making it a much more monitored, and collecting logs and auditing, and seeing where potentially, maybe there's lateral moves happening between those cloud environments, because they may not be public facing, but they actually could allow attackers to jump between those
Yeah.
different instances. So absolutely. So from what I'm thinking is like, yeah, it's not even just thinking about your entry points from the public side, but also across different environments and platforms.
Yeah, about that actually, I have in my to-do list some check to do because yesterday I found something very very interesting. I was reading about AWS Federation. The correct way to allow some CI/CD pipeline to have some kind of role in AWS is not generating some keys and giving the keys,
Mhm.
is by allowing OpenID connection, OpenID
Yeah.
Federation. And the thing is that you are going to say, okay, I want you to allow this. This usually is identified by a URL that is containing the information about the certificate that the in what I was checking the GitHub action is going to be
Mhm.
using. So you are going to be giving this things token.github.com URL. You configure everything, and I noticed something very curious, and is that in order to allow GitHub repository to access your role, you need to specify in the conditions the name of the organization and the name of the
Mhm.
repo. So I was thinking, first of all, what happened if, and still need to check
Mhm.
this, and if it works, this will probably be some CTF I will be creating. Um, what if you don't put the name of the organization or the name of the repo?
Mhm.
Anyone that knows the name is going to be able to access. Or what happens if you allows a repo that
Mhm.
then gets deleted and another person in the organization created and abused it? Like,
Okay.
this kind of trust is also generating new potential attack vectors.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to like the Wi-Fi SID names, where if you basically just replicate it and have overlapping SID names, you can basically steal people's connections. And it
Yeah.
sounds very similar to instances and namespaces. If you can, duplicate it, then all of a sudden you get someone to talk to you versus what they should be really talking to, and that could be start releasing or sharing sensitive information of if there's data been shared through that. So absolutely, it sounds like an interesting path to explore for sure. So
I
so
will checking it and writing about it in Cloud Hack Tricks.
fantastic. So Carlos, it's been awesome having you on again. This has been a fantastic conversation. I'm really excited to see where things are going, and absolutely, I think for organizations and anyone out there, for our audience, there's a lot of who's into pen testing, they're into security and defending, getting visibility, and I'm pretty sure a lot of them have. Very complex cloud environments that they're already struggling with. So hopefully this will give them a lot of value into really, starting to understand their environments more, understanding about where the risks are, what things they should be looking for, potentially trying to hire you in your organization and starting to use Purple Panda. You might be getting a lot of calls coming through after this episode goes air. Anything that you think, what for people who's really getting started here, what would be your thoughts? Where should they start at this point? Just as a kind of final kind of thoughts and notes when it's coming to cloud.
So for people that is starting, and I guess that's a lot of people
Mhm.
because cloud is getting more and more impact. I will tell two main things probably. The first one is that cloud isn't complex. You just have a lot of things to understand, but it isn't complex. It doesn't, in general, it doesn't have math. It doesn't have cryptography. You don't need to reverse. You don't need to. You need to create a proper exploit. You just need to understand a thousand things. You just need to understand how everything is working and how you can abuse it. So for people that is starting at the beginning, it can be you might not like it because you see yourself and learning about this service, about this other
Mhm.
service, about this other service, and you know you're not going to see any kind of final. But at some point, you're going to know, you're going to have a big picture of how everything working, and that's how you start understanding how you can start abusing permissions and roles and paths like in Purple Panda
Mhm.
across clouds and SaaS providers. And the other thing that I want to comment is that if everything goes correct, I will be starting a YouTube and or I haven't decided yet Twitch channel
Ooh,
where I want
this is gonna be
yeah
interesting.
where I want to talk mainly about pen testing in
Mhm.
cloud, pen testing in SaaS applications, but I will also be talking about CTF,
Mhm.
potentially interesting and weird. I like that. Web challenges, cybersecurity news in general.
Mhm.
So if you want to learn cloud, I guess you can use obviously Cloud Hack Tricks and check my some
Yeah,
channel.
we should get together. I think I've been thinking about if you're going to be doing a YouTube and Twitch channel, we should be doing some live CTFs for some of the cloud environments. I think even Hack the Box has a great. I think they did the AWS Academy one, which is also something. There's a couple of cloud environments that I know they've been working on. So might be
Yeah,
worth doing some live cloud was it CTFs and see how that goes. 'Cause it's always good. I always enjoy watching, the likes of John and IPSec and going through their videos, and you always get them thinking about what they're thinking about. But absolutely, I think what we're definitely missing is that creative content when it comes to cloud environments. I've seen a few, but I would definitely be interested to see what you're thinking about when you're coming across CTF challenges, and kind of what rabbit holes you get stuck in, and how you start kind of moving your way back and around. So I think that's exciting, and definitely one for the audience. We'll make sure that when those are made available and you do have your channel out, we'll make sure that we make it available, and so definitely you can get as many people following and learning as possible, because I think that's the way we learn, is by
yeah,
sharing what we do. And that's what this podcast is all about, is getting that information out there so people know what resources they can go to, what things they can find, which is interesting, and find their passion ultimately. So that's all what we can help navigate people to finding what they enjoy doing.
awesome. Thank you for sharing my YouTube channel and details. I hope to see all of you people there. I'm very excited about creating this channel,
Mhm.
and I think we are going to learn some interesting things. I have already prepared a few episodes, let's call it
Mhm.
like that, and they are going to be pretty interesting. And on as far as I know, is I'm going to be doing everything technical, so we can learn technical
Mhm.
stuff.
Oh,
So
fantastic! That's what it's all about. But I think the important part is it's you might be able to learn how to do the commands and what you're doing, but it's the thought process. That's the key. I
mm,
think that's it's when you kind of think about when you see certain things, you can work your way back to find out how you can segue or move around. So it's always that. I think that's the exciting part, and I think you've got a lot of interesting knowledge and experience and lessons to share from that side. So I'm really excited about seeing and when it gets out there and trying if you are doing some of this was it capture the flags I enjoy following along and trying it myself, so I'm excited.
thank you. We will definitely do that.
So it's been fantastic having you on the show again. I think this is really valuable and it's going to be a huge popular episode for the audience. So Carlos, you're awesome, keep up the great work, and definitely let's make sure that we're learning, ultimately making the world a safer place. So for the audience, the awesome Carlos Polop has joined us again, and his fantastic P suites and purple pandas and whatever other furry animals will come out in the future, I guess. We'll be waiting to see. So again, this is the 401 Access Tonight podcast. I'm Joe Carson with special guest Carlos. Make sure to tune every 2 weeks, catch up on the latest episodes, stay safe, have fun, hack the planet, keep the world safe, and enjoy as much as possible. So again, Carlos, you've been awesome. Take care and thank you.
Thank you for having me here.